They both.
Hello, Mark.
How are you today? This evening, I should say.
Good.
Looks like Steve Meyer has tried to join twice, but is having trouble.
I didn't get a chance to visit with him today. I apologize to him, but man, it's down here. You did not opt to hand out those maps, I hope.
No, not. Looks like he's joining twice now. We'll see which ones. Dr. Trahan, how are you?
Good evening.
Evening. We have Steve Meyer having trouble, so hopefully he's not the only one. He's the only one I see having trouble. Ah, there he is. I just got a message from Janice Jones that the Zoom is not streaming. See if I can fix that. Okay, We'll see if it's streaming now. Steve, you're muted. How are you doing today? Hello, Shannon.
Hello. There we go. I went off on the Google Meet and
Oh. Hopefully that's not where everyone else is. Well, we thought we had the live stream figured out, and it looks like maybe that's not the case, but we'll see. There's a delay with it anyway, I think. At any rate, we'll see if it goes.
well, if it's at least for this round, we can post it on the webpage.
Yeah, I'm satisfied with our progress so far in the short term. So when we get everyone on, I'll show that to you, and we'll go over it and see what people like and don't like. It says we have 9 waiting on the live stream, so there are going to be some disappointed folks, unfortunately. I'm not sure who all got the notice, but 10 waiting now, so I'll go back to the drawing board. It probably took, between Janice Jones and myself in my office, it probably took us an hour and a half to get everything set up and not correctly, obviously, so. We'll go back to the drawing board. I'll get our IT guys to come over and try to help in the coming days.
Hey, Mark, what's the problem? Is it not live streaming? Is that the issue?
Yeah, it's all set up and you can see that there's a county seal there on the YouTube site. And my Zoom device here says I'm live, but there's no connection evidently between the two. So,
Okay.
I don't know what to say about it. I can stop the live stream and try to start it again and see if that fixes it maybe.
That might help. Sometimes just resetting it.
Mhm. No. I'm sure it's user error. Well, or did we get any notice from other folks that they weren't going to be able to attend this evening, or we just have folks that late?
Yeah.
I assumed Bob, I think my office spoke to Bob today.
Yeah, my understanding is it should be here.
Yeah, he may be with Steve.
I don't have any audio from Steve.
Mhm. I do recall that Ken Strange said that he would be getting off the plane, I believe, late. So we do know that.
I think Bob should be joining anytime now. Because I had difficulty finding the link from the email today and it ended up in my spam. So I found it
Oh,
a few
right.
minutes.
Yeah. My county email has been caught by many a spam filter. I'm not sure why. And then Ruben Garza's absent as well. I did not get notice on him.
I think he said he was having surgery.
Yeah.
Today.
That's right. He was going to get on but be tipsy, right?
I'm getting Bob on. He jumped on meet by accident.
Okay. Very good. I'm going to go ahead and just stop that live stream since it doesn't look like it's going anywhere.
Is there any way to just put a message on the page quickly to let them know it's just not working, but the recording will be available?
Well,
If not, that's okay. I just didn't know if it was an easy fix.
I don't think there is on there. Unfortunately, there's no messaging is disabled on this particular, on the county site for,
Okay.
we're always careful about public comment where we offer it, opportunities for it and where we don't, because there's Bob. It's sort of an all or none for the government. So, but I think they'll get the gist of it here in a few minutes if we're not live streaming yet.
Okay, Bob's in now.
All right. All right, well, I think that may be all we're gonna have for now. We don't have a very thick agenda, and I just threw together a pretty quick agenda today to get us going. First up, unless you all have items you want to cover at the onset, we can talk about the web portal, the website that we've been building to be a public interface, and we'll go ahead and get going and share that screen with you all. Show you what we have. Any objection? We good?
That's fine. Did you send out an agenda, or we're just working from what you've got there?
Janice sent one out, and I believe it's posted on the website actually, so I can show it to you. As soon as I'll show you that first, and then I'll go to step one.
No, I just found it. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sharing it on my screen as well. If you just want to look there, it's fine. Today I had planned that we would look at the website and we could get feedback from you all regarding content. If you think something needs to move or change, I'm pretty happy with it in short order. I think Kim Helsenbeck, who's our public information officer, did a very good job with it. She came and sat with me in my office and talked about what we thought we wanted. And I, of course, told her mostly the things that we talked about in our last meeting. So there shouldn't be any surprises there, but I think it's something that can develop over time, and we can put some other information on there if everybody thinks that's a good idea. We did also, I also want to discuss how we'll go about using this email address that we have now created for the RAC, which will come to Janice Jones in my office. And I want to make sure that we're being efficient on the one hand with it, but also transparent with how we're using it with you all. And then I think Bob's going to talk about map proposals and how to approach that. I know he's been working on tinkering with that with a map or two of his own, and that may not be ready to present just yet. But I also know that the two party chairs have been trying to get an electronic version of a map to tinker with as well. So we can talk about that. Important would be timeline, which Bob, before the last meeting ended, I think you had to duck a little early, and we would like to, I think, refine the timeline moving forward, including when we would have community meetings, and maybe fit that within the statutory timelines we have to get everything done. And then whatever else you want to talk about. So we can be here as long as y'all like. So let's look at the website, if y'all will. I think we sent this link out as well, but this is a sub page on the county's webpage, and she's made it very pretty. It announces what the purpose of the RAC is. If someone clicks here on comments and questions, it will bring up, through whatever application they use for email, it'll bring up that RA Commission at county email address so that they can send an email in. And again, next item, I do want to talk about how we use that email. I think it's inefficient for you all to see every single email that comes through, but I don't want to shield you from it either, if that's what you all want. I think the idea would be that we would have people put comments and questions on here, and then we can sort of condense those into similar subject matters that you all can then discuss, and or we can simply provide an answer and tell you what we said so that you're in the know and in the loop on that. We have here in the next section, as you scroll down, the meeting schedule. We have the live link that's not working here at this point. And then we have our next meeting posted, which hopefully we'll have a functioning live link below that at the next meeting. We have the agenda. And then here we're going to upload video archives. We already have one, and we were, by the way, able to retrieve the audio or the, I forget what we were using, GoToMeeting, I think last time or something. Teams, yeah. We had the Teams recording from last meeting, so we'll get that posted. Kim just hadn't gotten to that yet. And that'll be posted along with this one here in this section. We name the appointees and what your capacities are. And then we have the charter that people can click on here for the link. Down at the bottom, this is, I think, very important and can develop into even more important information as it is developed. I imagine, here you can click on a link to go to, for instance, the current commissioner's precinct map. I think it's important to show where we're coming from. If we're moving these lines around, and people need to be able to look and see. I think some folks don't have a clear view on what precinct they're in even now. And so showing them, and particularly when you get into the constables and JP's precincts, because I think a lot of folks don't even know that those precincts are different than the commissioner's precincts. We have 5 instead of 4, and this is the layout of those. So those links I think are important for educational purposes. But if there is a proposed map or proposed maps that ends up being kind of put into play officially, then those can also be put on here if the RAC sees fit to do so. Last go around 10 years ago, we had really, I think, 3 officially pitched maps that were being discussed and deliberated. And at some point it kind of condensed down to 3 maps that people were talking about. And that's something that could have been disseminated. It was disseminated in other ways back 10 years ago. We didn't have this ability back then, or didn't use it at least.
Hey, Mark, would you mind speaking up just a little bit? I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing.
Sure. Yeah, sorry about that. So anyway, that's the site, the gist of the site. Do you all see any? We also have a link, by the way, at the bottom here, and maybe we need to colorize this so it stands out a little more. But this is a link to the Commissioner's Court presentation made by Bob Bass, where the court members asked questions, and I think some of you were there in court that day, or at least have watched it since. So, this section down here is really meant to be informational and educational for folks. So we can include more information if we think it's appropriate, and that's certainly input I would want to hear from you all. So.
Where is the listing of the recorded meetings? So if somebody wanted to go back in.
It'll be right here.
Archives, okay.
In this section, video archives. It's not there yet, but
Right.
it will be. Yeah.
Mark,
Yes.
because that presentation is such a great foundational piece, it probably should be on par where we have resources and applicable law as the same as those precinct boundaries and the precinct boundary maps.
Yeah. Instead of having it down here, put it up here somewhere.
I would make it look similar to those so that
Right.
it is evident for them.
Yeah. Okay. I had asked Kim to put that in there. I just honestly just now noticed that it was down here at the bottom. So, we'll get it fixed.
That's a lot of work in a quick amount of time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, like I said, Kim's done a great job. We were sending her the information on the precincts maps today, and she had the links uploaded within 30 or 40 minutes. She was doing quick work of it. So, any questions, comments, concerns over it?
I just have a quick question. I think it looks wonderful. I don't know if we want to go back to just talking through the logistics of the comments when information does come in through that email account and kind of how you were thinking of hand.
You bet. And that's really the next item. I guess there's no prohibition against going back and talking about the website if you all want to, but I have here a small disclaimer written right below this that says questions and comments submitted here are not part of the public record necessarily. I want to make sure that the email address isn't viewed as a venue for public comment like you would have at the beginning of a commissioner's court session or in some other setting, other opportunities for public comment. And there will be plenty of opportunity for that. The community meetings that we'll set up are precisely for that, for those opportunities. And the reason I wanted to put the disclaimer there is that I don't think that every comment or question that comes through the email is going to be of value necessarily to you all, or it may be redundant. We handled a tremendous number of questions and comments during COVID, especially at the beginning of it, and found that the sheer number that was hitting us from week to week was largely redundant. The number of questions were duplicative. And so certainly I think that if you all wanted to get a view on everything that's come through, you could, but I think I would task my office with trying to create an FAQ out of the emails that come in. And we could even attempt with Bob Bass's help from time to time when we need more legal expertise, we could attempt to answer the questions. And then there could be, I think, a frequent comments section, something that's an equivalent of an FAQ that we could condense as well. I don't want our effort to condense the duplication and make it more efficient to be seen as some sort of manipulation of information. That won't be our intention, but I do want us to be efficient. Any thoughts on that from you all?
Well, I've got one question. I was kind of assuming that when we do have the interviews with our communities of interest, that if they have some additional thoughts or something that they'd like to send in, they could send in via that. I realize, I'm sure you're absolutely right, that there's just going to be a lot of redundancy, and some people might say, well, where do you bury the bodies? Because this looks like a pretty field. I mean, things that are just totally not
Right.
pertinent.
Not relevant, right?
Not relevant,
Yeah.
but we still, we keep everything as part of the record. We just don't need to go through all of that, but it would still
Right.
be a place where people can make comments about their communities that we can still look at, so that technically it's part of the record, although we aren't going to be looking at all of it because of the redundancies.
Correct. Yeah, and that's a good point, Shannon. I think maybe we'll change this verbiage a little bit. I told Kim generally what I wanted, but anything that comes through this email address could be subject to a public information request by a citizen, and they could see everything. There's no prohibition against that. So in that sense, it is part of the public record. I really just meant to have her say, just because you put the email in here doesn't mean we're going to put it on the website.
Right. That's kind of what I thought.
And so I'll work on that and tweak that a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
I think you're right with streamlining because there will be duplicate kinds of messages.
Mhm.
I don't know though if there's a way to just dump the messages somewhere where if for some reason we're concerned, somebody says, you know, I've sent 5 different ones and we don't want to make your staff go through that, but we could say, well, let's just go and do a quick search. Have we gotten something from you? Where are we? I don't know how easy that is, other than it just being forwarded to us. And I'm not sure that's what we also want either in our inboxes. So I don't know if that's an option, but just something I thought I would throw out.
I think we can do a dump and prep it for a request. My office coincidentally also handles all the public information requests, generally all of them in the county, and especially the ones that have to do with email. So we have the ability to do that and sort of condense it into a streaming PDF that you could just scroll through and look through and see what's there. We can.
And I'm hoping we don't need that. I just think because then each of us has been appointed, it again gives one other layer of transparency where any of us could go in and see anything at any.
Absolutely. That's fine. All right. Any other comments on that?
There'll be a place, I take it, I couldn't see it, where it'll say this, kind of like what the county does. You want to watch the meeting live, it'll be, click on that link.
Yeah, that should be there already. Well, it's just not working. So, but we'll get it going.
Okay.
Hey, Mark, is there a way to put on some tools and resources on there, like accessing programming for mapping and kind of information that we can add about an understanding of how redistricting works? So there's just some basic general education, and also do a piece around how people can conceptualize this process. Yeah.
You bet.
And I would like to add to that. I agree on those, but also one of the things that I found over the years is precious few people really understand what do the commissioners do. They don't know. And so they might confuse this with the city, they might confuse it with the state. And just a little blurb on the county commissioners are, you know, whatever their statutory authority is, plus they do things like the roads and they oversee the jail and they do the, you know, this, you know, just give a few bullet points of what the commissioner's court actually does. That might help the public as well.
Yeah, good point. That would be, there's this resources and applicable law will have other links beneath it, including, and I think I indicated, Dr. Trahan, the last meeting, that we would put some of that here. I just haven't done it yet, and we'll be doing that. I think we can have this more built out before our meeting on the 20th. All right, well, I may stop my share and we can always go back to that if you guys have additional thoughts. Keep us moving for the purposes of time at least. And I'm going to, Bob, I don't know, do you need me to give you the ability to share tonight, or how are we doing? Oh, you're muted.
If you would, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, you bet. You should be able to do that now.
All right, do you all see this is the chart that I showed you. This shows you where we are at the present time. And we've got about 12,000 people we need to move. I have, we met the last time we spoke, I was asked to look at moving whole VTDs or voter tabulation districts, election precincts. and I have worked up a plan that I would like to show you. This is a plan that uses VTDs. I played around with the suggestion to go north of take territory out of 4 in these 2 precincts or voting boxes. And that worked relatively well, but I wasn't satisfied with, we were still at about 7% deviation when I kind of finished working on it. So I started over again today, and this plan has a pretty good performance. Now, you know, what's pretty good, I guess, and I could show you up on the data sheets, but it may be a little easier to see it here in a similar format to what you're used to seeing. Can you see the chart that has a 1.87? Hopefully. That's the deviation of the map I just showed you, and we'll come back to the map. 1.87 good, that's a deviation of less than 700 people top to about 425 bottom. Those are the 2 districts that make up this one. So, and that's between 1 and 2, which do share a boundary. 3 and 4 share boundaries, and they're even closer, or is 0.03. So this, it also, looking down at the voting age population, slightly increases the percentage of minority strength in precinct 1, which is where the minority population is located essentially. I think in the plan before, voting age Hispanic was down to 50%. This brings it back to 55 roughly percent. So it preserves that as a pretty strong minority district. It leaves all of the incumbents located in their precincts. Continuity of leadership is a valid concern. It takes usually a term of office to kind of have a commissioner become truly efficient and effective. So we try to keep incumbents in their districts. I'll go back now and kind of walk around the district a little bit. Here's a the way we built this is we took, let me zoom in a little bit. Looking at 1, we took in a good bit of Niederwald. What you're seeing here is the shading in a darker shade typically are the city boundaries. We tried not to divide cities very much. We took population out of 2 and moved it into 1. And then we moved population out of 1 in the other end, dipping down below 35, and took population out of 1 into 3. We also took population here in San Marcos out of 1 that was north of 35 into 3. We took population out of 2 on the other end into 4 in this area, the whole voting boxes. And that's the substantive areas where work was done. From a legal perspective, I think this satisfies the Voting Rights Act and the numerical balance test. Certainly there are other ways to do it, and I don't mind taking some direction tonight if you want to see that done, but I would highly recommend that this plan be very seriously considered because it works. Now, I understand there's concern on the part of the, there's been some, I say concern, there've been questions about communities of interest. We've attempted to leave cities pretty much intact. I'm not, a community of interest is a little hard to define, as you will recall in looking at the minority populations. It's really focused here in Ulen, Naderwald, and then in the south of I-35 or east of I-35 in the Kyle area. So that's where the Hispanic population is virtually the strongest. There is about 42%, I believe, Hispanic population in Precinct 2 under this plan. So it's a fairly strong influence district, with precincts 3 and 4 being largely more dominant Anglo. The overall population of Black is relatively small, but it comes in at about 6% in Precinct 1, I believe. We tried, in the years past, we somewhat would lump Hispanic and Black voters together on the assumption they would vote in harmony with each other. That's not necessarily so. So a minority district where particularly one is more dominant than the other, we try to focus on the more dominant minority to make sure it is viable, as opposed to trying to depend on a harmony in voting or a common interest in voting among different racial characteristics. That being said, any comments?
I have a comment. Bob, why are you keeping that central island in the mapping process? I'm not clear why that's continuing to persist.
Central Island, I assume you're talking about this area in 4?
Yes, sir.
Well, I've tried to break it into kind of reduce it. Let me illustrate maybe if I want to look at maybe moving some of that territory over into 3, for example. We would target 3, we would source 4. And if I use the voting district and selected this voting box, let's just see, sometimes it'll tell you how many people are in there. Let's go ahead and assign it just to see what it does to the percentages. Not that bad, but if you get over here and you start getting into more populated areas and assign that, now we're out of balance again. So these voting, if you take whole voting boxes, usually it's because the numbers of a whole voting box are just too big. And so it's hard, you've got to kind of pick and choose which ones you use. And of course here then we would have a resulting non-contiguity for what the pieces here are still pretty populated. All this is pretty populated. So to get rid of it, it really just means chasing your tail around the county trying to move overpopulated into underpopulated. And so you try to do it as a straightforward matter. That being said, I mean, there are any number of ways to do it. So I'd be glad to, you know, play with it. If somebody wants to set up a workshop, we can, you know, do it again. Whatever.
Bob,
Yes.
is there a way that we could overlay this with the present mapping boundaries, just so that we could see what that shift is, what it looks like? And I know you may not be able to do
Sure
that.
there is. I'm not the guru on this thing. It's pretty obvious, I think. We have a GIS person, and it could be that Steve at your end could do more of that. My job, as I see it, is to kind of give you legal counsel. I'm not, you know, that adept a computer person, but I think there's probably a way to show the existing boundaries as permanent boundaries and then see how the shifts work. But right tonight, I can ask my person to set something up.
Okay.
This, like I say, this plan works remarkably well. I'm not trying to necessarily pitch it to you, but I've spent, you know, quite a lot of years doing this work, and I know it's kind of awkward. It looks backwards. People say, well, I equate it to building a jigsaw puzzle in reverse, where you start with a known and then build around it, rather than just so the known to me for a legal basis is that precinct 1 needs to remain a viable, strong minority district. And once, you know, that's accomplished, even though it doesn't need much tampering with on numerical balance, it was fairly weak at only 50% minority voting strength. It really needs to be a little closer, even up to 60%. But that's because minority Hispanic voters tend to be younger and less registration and lower turnout than other Anglo or even Black populations. So that's my benchmark, you might say, is to keep 1 pretty strong. That being said, then the big problem is shedding other population out of 2 and getting it over into 3. And so I did that sort of in reverse by taking population out of 1, giving it to 3, and then taking population out of 2 up in this area. So there are, you know, other approaches, and I'd be glad to work with you on that. I just need the time to do it. And it may be the better way to do it is to sit down with you face to face rather than trying to do it remotely.
I do think, Shannon, can I just ask a quick follow-up, Shannon? And then I know you have a question. One, I would just say, yes, I think it might be very helpful for us to see, and if we can somehow view the existing boundaries and see how those changes really affect what's happening. But my follow-up question, I don't know if there's any information. I know you mentioned a little while ago about, I guess initially in previous redistricting, we had considered putting the Black population with the Hispanic population, that they probably would vote similarly.
Hello.
That out. I don't know if there's anything that says, you know, seeing some of the changes in the Hispanic vote even, is that a consideration for us that we consider as we're looking at how we're drawing these lines as well? And that it seems that some of that is changing. And so it's not the same. So just a thought out there. I don't know if there's something that has been considered in that respect, but something to ask you for maybe future, or what you think might be some things to consider along those lines.
Well, like I say, we've learned over the years that that's not necessarily so, but that being said, this plan does have 54.95% Hispanic, but it also has the largest percentage of Black voters at 5.68. So the combined minority, and again, you've got American Indian, you've got Asian, you've got Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders, you've got others, and you've got multi-race. So the Anglo percentage at the end is 34.02%. Now, my point is that just because those folks are all non-Anglo, that doesn't necessarily mean they vote in any particular pattern, but that district does have the highest concentration of minorities of all sorts. And so if there is any shared voting, it would be in that district.
You'd have to turn on. It's okay.
Thank you.
I don't know if that answers your question or not.
I think it helps for now. I appreciate it.
Bob, I've got a question on your desire to put a lot more Hispanics into one, even though it was a good size, you said, but the future might change. I'm not familiar with that process to where we look into the future as opposed to looking at the census of 2020. Are we going to do that for the other districts? Look at the future of white voters, or, I mean, that it's something.
Well, I don't know that that's what I was saying. I said, I think looking back, and I still haven't seen the data from 2010 to see what that district was sized as in terms of minority content in 2010. The whole county grew by nearly 50% or more. And so I assume all of the districts gained population. It just so happens that one remained within the target, you might say, of an ideal size precinct, but it was at 50% is not considered in redistricting practice as being that strong a district. And so to preserve it as a minority district, in my view, it has to have some help going forward. Now, the Voting Rights Act dictates that we not fragment or pack minority content any more than necessary, but we do have to build, where the population is sufficient, a viable, not a guarantee, but at least a viable district that a minority candidate of quality can run and win in. And I just have concerns under the Voting Rights Act if we let that district become weaker. And that's based on the current data. You may phrase it as looking forward. I'm just trying to protect minority voting rights today. And that's what it is going to take, in my view.
Can I see the map again, Bob? Would you scroll it back up so I can see? It's not on my screen anymore.
What's that now?
Would you mind scrolling it back up so I could see the actual map? It's not on my screen anymore.
There you go.
Thank you.
Now, this is sort of a less detailed map. Let me pull up the one on the actual computer. Share that screen with you. It's a better. Well, that's the same thing.
While you're doing that, Bob,
Yeah,
The map has disappeared completely.
can you see that now?
I do see it now.
while we're looking at that, I think it's really important we sit and discuss at this point in time, what are we defining as communities of interest? I mean, we've discussed the need to maintain cities and municipalities, not fragment them. We've discussed the importance of the Hispanic vote, and your proposed map here, as you pointed out, increases the Hispanic vote in precinct 1. But what other, if any, communities of interest are there? I mean, I, for one, think, and I think the county judge has pointed out many times that one of the areas that is of great interest as a community interest is Texas State as a university. And if we look at what you've done with the map right there, you've taken 111 and 112, and you've taken 115 out of San Marcos, out of precinct 1, and you shuffled them into 3, which fragments both San Marcos and Texas State University.
I don't think Judge Becerra is ever going to sit still for that.
And you've then
I
taken
don't-
229 and out of 2 and put it into 1. I've got
I'm
the commissioner's maps that overlays here with the precincts and stuff too.
And I'm sorry for interrupting. My name, this is Ruben Garza. I got on late and I apologize for that. But I don't see how you can, Box 112 has a ton of Hispanics. The Westover area has tons of Hispanics, and you're taking all those areas out. And I know because I've walked those streets door to door. So I know there are a ton of Hispanics.
And you're
in
talking
those
about this
areas.
area right in here.
You
You've
go up,
got where you've added to the east side of I-35. That's precinct 115 down there that you've moved. And then above that, just to the north of where that indention is across I-35, there's an outcropping that goes into 3 that is 112 and 111, which has got a very, 112 has got almost what, let's see, let me look at this real quick and I can tell you. 112 has got 3,806 population, 2484 registered, and a high Hispanic density.
I
Well,
don't,
again,
I don't
I
get,
mean, I don't know the community as well as you all do. And so that's why I think we need to have a long session. It takes like 2 or 3 hours hunting and pecking. If y'all have some ideas, and again, Steve, you have the ability to sit down there and put something together, and I will certainly be glad to look at a plan that the committee feels strongly about to see if it, in my opinion, meets the numerical balance test and the Voting Rights Act. I don't have an agenda here. I'm just trying to honor the Voting Rights Act first, and then numerical balance is also critical. I think you can tolerate up to maybe a 5% deviation and still have some hope that 10 years from now you might not have to redraw, but it would be best to get it down as close to 0 as you could. But it's just your population around San Marcos, Buda, Kyle, is a lot of people packed in pretty tight. Those subdivisions, there's just a lot of people in the voting boxes, and so they don't move, you can't move whole voting boxes that easily. So we can go down to the census block level and fine tune it if you wish. But again, then, I was just following the recommendation that we use voting boxes, and this is the one way I got it as low as I could get it and still keep high minorities, but I understand what you're telling me.
I tend to agree with Steve about clearly this, again, it looks that 4 seems to be gerrymandered, and I know you have to play with the numbers, but it splits the university up the way you have it into 3.
4 does, or 1 and 3 do?
Well, it looks like 4, 3, and 1 will have some part of the university.
You need to get
Can't
a
tell
little
what the-
bit closer.
4 actually won't have, based on what they've got, 4 won't have. 4 still ends down at 419 with the overlay I've got. It still ends down about 419. What he shifted is 111 and 112, which is right in the heart of the university. And then 115, which is just to the southeast of the university. And there's a lot of apartments and multifamily housing down through there. And the ages in those areas are 115, the average age is 34, which is highly indicative of a much younger crowd, typically students, et cetera, from that standpoint, because the overall age in the county is much higher than that. So, yeah, I think that, if we agree that Texas State University is a community interest, if it's not, then I'm making a moot point. But if we agree Texas State University is a community interest, this particular proposal doesn't work well because it does break up Texas State University. But even if we don't want to talk about Texas State, it also fragments San Marcos as a municipality to a certain extent.
right.
Well, you're going to have to do that to some extent. I mean, it's just too big a population center to eat or swallow in one precinct. Now you could dice it up differently. I don't dispute that. So like I say, Mark has suggested maybe having the committee work with Steve and come up with a plan that I can do some legal analysis on. I'm open to that. Or I can come, it takes long enough that it would be tedious to do, and it's slower on the, when I'm streaming it or in a Zoom meeting than it is when I'm just on the computer by myself or without having to share the screen with anyone. It might take 2 or 3 hours, but it might come closer to a plan that's acceptable than I'm able to do operating out of some ignorance.
Well, one of the things this committee, my understanding is this committee is supposed to be doing is talking to people out in the county and establishing those communities of interest. So we can set it all tonight, and we still haven't talked to the people. And so it seems like we need to, before we spend a huge amount of time trying to parse some of these districts, we need to set up the meetings that we're going to have, talk about the people we're going to talk to, get input from the community before we set too much of this and do too much work, because we might end up splitting a group of people we really haven't even thought about.
Right.
Well, I would just give you one cautionary note. The legislature is working as we speak, and if they come out with a plan and it looks like they may, when they think they've got the votes to pass it, that may still leave us with precious little time. So if we're going to have public hearings or public forums in multiple places, we need to get it on the calendar and get after it, because we're going to run out of time drawing plans if we, and I'm part of that's my fault. We've just had trouble with the data. I apologize for any delay I've caused, but we're now down to really critical time.
I agree. That's why I'm saying we need to move on that, because our Mark Kennedy can confirm, isn't that part of our charge, is to have at least 4 of these hearings. Now, the beauty is doing those on Zoom helps a lot. So we're not having to drive all over the place and people don't have to drive to us. But we still need to start getting those scheduled and talk about the people, who do we want to hear from, and questions we're going to ask and all of that.
And I think that was, we'd all agreed, that's what we wanted to schedule today, to ensure that we really are putting enough time out there.
That's actually the next item up on the agenda. But before we move on from this one, let me say that, I expected that despite Bob's effort, that there may be issues that people take with the map. I'm sure Bob thought that too. And I think what he's trying to do here is present you with something that meets the letter of the law as they go from. I mentioned that Dr. Trahan in an email I sent earlier this week was that any work that Steve or Bob do now would be just, sort of a go from. It's an exercise to help us get a better grasp of what we're having to do to meet the legal standards, in addition to going out and meeting the other standards that we want to meet. So,
Mark, let me just say this.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you,
that's
but
okay.
I feel that we need to have 2 to 3 options on the maps, because, the way these maps are presented, if we go public with this map, then it almost, sometimes becomes stone when you get to a public hearing. And then what you have is controversy. You really don't have discussion.
Yeah.
And so people realize that they're draft maps. They're not absolute maps. Because I'll tell you right now, I'm not in favor of removing 12 or 11 from precinct 1. You have a minority population there, and it can be put back in. And there's no, there are other ways of meeting the letter of the law, and we need to have those. We need to have those options.
You bet. And
I understand what Bob is doing, and I don't think Bob has any other concern than trying to meet the letter of the law. But at the same time, as he said himself, he doesn't know the population. He doesn't know the community like we do.
Right.
And, those are areas of interest. Those are people that have, for years, and I know I've been involved for years, have been voting in precinct 1, and to take them out disenfranchises them as minorities from the minority district.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure right now, precinct 1 looks like to me it's extended all the way to Euland. Am I correct on that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And I don't understand why we have to go all the way to Euland to find the minorities when we can find them in the middle of Kyle. Why
We
you
Well,
can't
we
look
tend
at
to
that,
we tend to
frankly,
agree with that.
Well, all I'm saying is the way that when I left these precincts in 1 and took out this, it did not help the minority content of 1.
What are you talking about?
Well, when I left the blocks that were north or west of 35, right down in this area, San Marcos, the concentration, the density of the minority content was less here than it is out here. And that's why I added it into 1 out here, and then it's about 50-50 or no more than about 50-50 right in here. It's nearly 80-90% concentration percentages out in the Niederwald Euland area.
Hey,
So that's
Bob,
why I did it. Now, that being said, until you just sit there and try different scenarios, you don't know what's doable and what's not. And so it's just going to take some tinkering. And like I say, it doesn't do me any good to spend the time tinkering out of ignorance. Whereas if I sat down with you or I'd be glad to sit down with whoever the committee wants. They could come to my office. We could do it remotely. I mean, you tell me where to click on the stuff and I'll do it. And we'll see if it's possible.
Yeah, and I understand,
Nice.
Bob, but at the same time, I don't understand how you take out a majority Hispanic area and erase it from precinct 1 completely because you had the number of Hispanics in there. But of course, you have a bigger population in the Euland area because a lot of people are moving in there. I know. I used to live in Kyle. I live in San Marcos now, but I used to live in Kyle. My house sold in 3 hours. I know people are moving in there, mostly from California, a lot of them. So you're right. The population could change down the road. But precinct 12 has always been historically minority, and so has precinct 11. So I'm not quite sure why we took it out of precinct 1.
Well,
So,
like I said,
Bob, you have the task of Solomon. I mean, you really do.
Yeah.
You've got to decide how to split the baby, and I understand that.
Okay, quick question. Did you get my email earlier this week
about the files?
about the GIS?
We're asking.
Are you talking to Mark Kennedy? Are you talking to me?
Yes, Mark Kennedy, I'm sorry.
So I saw a response from maybe Dr. Lopez earlier said that some stuff had gone to your spam. Maybe it's going to yours as well, but I saw a correspondence from Steve Floyd to you, Steve Meyer, today, talking about what he had done to provide maps so far. It ended by saying that he's working on an electronic version, but that he needed some more input on, and I can look back and see what he said, but I think you all said that you just needed a few add-ons or a couple of add-ons, and he did not know what those were.
Let me explain to the group what I'm proposing here, and I'd love to have everybody's feedback. What I have requested from the GIS department from Hayes County is they already have existing GIS maps that have the commissioner districts as overlays. And you can go into the GIS map and you can click on a checkbox, you can take out a district and you can click on it, put it back in. They're color coded, so you have the ability to see them and look at them. What I've asked for is a voting precinct level map just like that, so that we have the ability to do two things. One is add and remove voting precincts, but what would be even better, in the addition I've asked for from Mark and Steve Floyd, and I leave him voicemail today because I understand he's out till the end of the week. But if we could get a voting precinct level map for the county that we could change the colors on, we can then do our own shuffling. We could all sit together and do our own shuffling independently, and together we could propose maps. We don't have to have the GIS department spend time on it. We don't have to have Bob spend time on it. We can work on our own maps. I have already broken down, I've got all the census data, and I've already broken it down, and I have the populations by precinct, if Bob doesn't have it already. If he does, he could provide it. I'm not bickering over the source, but I'm saying I have that data already broken down. We have broken it down, started looking at it, and already started, shuffling around some precincts, looking at possible scenarios. I think if the group as a whole had that opportunity to be able to move chess pieces within those voting precincts, within those voting blocks, it can be done. We've already come up with a couple of different proposals, but I think everybody should have the opportunity to play with that, and it's going to go faster. We're on a short time frame. We've got public meetings we want to do. If we can do a lot of this work ourselves, we're going to get this done faster. If we have to wait for third parties, nothing against GIS, nothing against Bob, but they've got other tasks, they got other responsibilities, they got other things, and we're going to just be in line.
We're never going.
Can you still see the map?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just turned on the voting districts. Those are those lighter gray lines. So, I mean, I already have the voting district data. That's how I built these plans. So, I mean,
Bob, I don't see those.
Oh, we're not seeing anything.
We're
Your
not
map
seeing
isn't
anything.
changing. You've been talking about all these changes you're making to the map, and nothing is happening to the map.
Yeah.
The map is just the color-coded commissioner's proposal that you did, the initial one. Nothing has ever changed in any of the things that you've talked about.
It might be that you shared the document and not the screen, Bob.
Oh,
well, like I say, this was just a kind of a hypothetical plan that does work legally, but it can be altered.
Bob, would
So-
you mind, is this on District R? How did you do it?
This is an Excel spreadsheet. If you look at the extension up at the top of the document,
I know,
Hayes
but it's-
proposal.
No, it's in a thing called Maptitude. It's a special built software for redistricting.
Would you mind sending this out, please?
What, the map?
Yes,
Yeah, I can do that.
thank you.
Yeah.
Sending it to us via
So-
email. I'd like to see the Maptitude version of this, please.
You'd like to see what?
I'd like you to send me the Maptitude file or connection, whatever it looks like, so we can take a look at it.
Do you, yeah, it's a pretty, do you have the ability to read shape files?
Yes, sir.
I can send you a shape file.
That's what I need.
The caliper or Maptitude does called an extension, an RDL, I think. And it's not that friendly. It'd be hard for anybody to open it unless they have a licensed software.
Okay.
But the shape file is pretty universal, and I can have it converted to that.
That'd be great.
All right.
So let me go ahead. I'm sorry, somebody was talking.
I really think that we need to start schedule that perhaps
Yeah.
we already have us to meet. Perhaps that's our workshopping time. I think, yes, Mr. Bass is here trying to give us legally, but really it rests on us to move things around, to figure out what's going to be the right combination that we can feel sure that we are presenting best option. And we need to second and third, but really the best scenarios, so that then we have something to start that conversation with our communities of interest, and start getting feedback.
Yeah, agreed. So I would pitch, and I'm going to step away from the charter, strict language of the charter for a moment, and pitch an idea that perhaps we could get Steve, Floyd, and Bob together in a work session that's live with the commission, and have either or both of them work live with a map. I know Steve's software is potentially a little faster than Bob's and a little friendlier to a Zoom meeting. Alternatively, we could have, I'm not sure how we would live stream the meeting, but we could have a meeting in the commissioner's courtroom, stay as spread out as you wanted, to have a work session there where we put a map on the screen, on the big screen, and we do it there live, all of us in the room. I think we could come up with a way to do it where we're actually manipulating data real time and talking about it. The way the charter reads now is that the two party chairs would go together to meet with Steve Floyd. This was something that the Commissioners Court thought of his past experiences with redistricting, because Steve was getting pulled a lot of different directions, even by folks who weren't part of a commission at all. So they said, we want him to be engaged by two people. And we want him to be engaged by two people at the same time, not individually, so that he's having to juggle. I think this is a reasonable deviation from that, if Steve agreed that it was a good use of his time to meet with you all. Either, and I can come up with a way to do it, hopefully to satisfies our live stream objective as well. Is that something we would be interested in?
I think that might be good eventually, but I don't know what the timeline would be, because I agree with Michelle that we need to set our meetings
Yes.
first to get those COIs, to get that input before we start getting down into the weeds of specific
bet.
precincts.
Well,
Well,
along
let's
with
talk.
that thought, if I may, where am I here? Along with that thought, if we go out and try to have public input meetings and we don't have a map that shows voting precincts on it, I just think we're wasting our time, because
Yeah.
that's what the people think about. They think about voting precincts.
And I think we have time. I think tonight we set our agenda, our schedule. 2 weeks from now.
If I could offer a suggestion, I think if I could make a suggestion that maybe Steve and I get together, I'm available. I've got to go over to Bastrop on the 18th in the afternoon, but I can come over early that morning, sit down with Steve Floyd and maybe the two chairs, and we could probably develop 1, 2, or even possibly 3 alternatives that are more suitable to the local community. And then you'd have working maps to discuss at your workshop or your public meeting.
I think that would be okay, but the communities of interest, are they only by map, or are we trying to figure out what is actually binding certain people together regardless of any map?
Well, communities of interest in the law are any community that have common interests that vote typically in more of a unified way, and they should not be fragmented if you can avoid it. Now, I use the term if you can avoid it and still meet the other legal tests. So communities of interest are important, but they're not sacrosanct.
Sure.
And so, you know, it's a balancing act, and
But we don't know that.
is the test, and that's all I'm gonna say on it. I mean,
And I
it's just
understand.
very hard in the abstract for anybody to get very much of anywhere if they don't have something specific to look at and talk about.
Might I just offer to you, some understanding of your criteria, Bob, just kind of feeding this back to you based on what I understand from your report. So first of all, your criteria is that the population within each precinct needs to be roughly equal within 5%, correct?
Top to bottom can't exceed 10%. So 5% is pushing the limit. I would say really they ought to be balanced within about 2% of each other, because you're going to have one above and one below.
Okay, so 5%. And then you mentioned that keeping the precincts as close to the current location as possible is a part of the criteria. Is that correct?
You don't want to make wholesale changes, no.
Correct. Okay, and you also mentioned that in terms of majority minority communities, we want to make sure that we have the population of these communities somewhere between 50 to 60%. And I've heard various numbers in this conversation from we're at 53 and that could be okay to 55 to 58. I mean, I've heard the different numbers, but what I'm kind of thinking is that you picked probably somewhere around 55% because you're at 54.7 on this map. And so you're pretty satisfied with that. So 55% is what you're looking for. Is that correct?
I would like to see it higher, but I'm willing to live with what that 55% is sort of what I consider de minimis requirement.
Okay, and then the last criteria is this piece around communities of interest and trying to keep communities whole so they're not split up, so they're represented and their voice is heard. Correct. That's a criteria too. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay, so I think those are kind of your main 4 criteria. Are there any other main criteria that we're looking at here?
Not for the legal purposes. The commissioners' courts are going to want to see that, they don't want, they're still on they're not a unit system, right, Mark? It's still, each commissioner maintains their roads in their precincts. So they're going to want to make sure that those are relatively equally balanced. Obviously, they're not. 3 is huge, 4 is huge. 1 and 2 don't have as many road miles, but those are secondary.
Correct, because the size isn't as important as the population, am I right? So the size of these precincts are not going to matter. It's the population within them that's going to matter. Am I right?
That's what people vote. Roads don't.
Correct. Okay. So now that we have our 4 criteria, it sounds to me like we can work off those criteria to have a better idea of how we want to do this. Am I right?
That's why they're in there as criteria. Yes, sir.
All right. That sounds good. And I would agree that I think we should do a session at some point. Now, what I would suggest in order to be able to collect community of interest data at the same time is that we not necessarily set this meeting up in the next couple of weeks. That we actually schedule some community of interest interviews over the next couple of weeks, and that we do this in 2 weeks from now, because we need time to set all this up anyway. 2 or 3 weeks from now, once we have some sort of map from that session, we can always publish those maps online for community feedback afterwards as well. So we can actually get 2 rounds of community feedback in the beginning and on the backside. What do you think about that, Bob?
I don't know how you're going to map communities of interest. They're not identified on a map. They're not identified in the census data. So, I mean, that's just subjective. It's your opinion of what a community of interest is, but it's based on ethnicity. It's based more on ethnicity than anything else, because typically the case laws evolved around voting rights of minority voters.
How do people usually measure?
I think there's some case law that, Prairie View A&M, for example, is a community of interest. It's also predominantly Black. So I think you're going to have trouble trying to define something that's not well defined in the law, and then waiting 3 weeks, in my opinion, is going to make it almost impossible to. If the legislature crams it through, we got to have a plan in place so that people can file as early as November the 15th.
Yeah.
Sounds like we need to have the workshop soon, so that we all feel comfortable that we have seen how moving things affects what we need, and going ahead and have those quickly, the feedback sessions with where we need to be. And we are scheduled to meet in 2 weeks. That would probably, it sounds like, Bob, you would be back in, you could probably meet with our chairs to maybe strategize on how we run the workshop on the 20th, but take that time that we scheduled on the 20th to meet in person and try to work through this, but going ahead and say, let's meet on the 20th for a workshop. When do we want to go ahead and schedule time to meet with at least each of the people in each of the 4 districts? And that they may also help us to determine, are we missing a community of interest that we haven't thought about with those conversations?
Well, I think you need to schedule those meetings in about 2 different days, one in the morning, one meeting in one precinct in the morning, one in the afternoon. But next day do it in the other 2 precincts. Staggering it out over 3 weeks period is just not, we don't have that much luxury of that much time.
No, I agree. I agree. I think it needs to be short. Listening to everything, my thoughts are, we need to schedule this tonight so that we know immediately after our workshop, we know when we're meeting.
Right. I think that, Ruben made a point earlier that if you don't have a few maps, maybe a couple of maps to point at, that that it tends to go off the rails. And I did imagine, and this is just me, I did imagine that when we had these community meetings, whether we were finished analyzing communities of interest or not, we would have something to point at that people could go from and talk about. Now, I'm not saying it needs to be the map that Bob pitched tonight. It could be something that each of the parties is pitching. The last time we did this 10 years ago, we had the Democrats pitching a Western precinct. We had the Republicans pitching 2 different maps and couldn't agree on them. So we ended up with 3 maps. Inevitably, the parties usually end up taking a different pitch on what they believe should be the answer. And I'm not saying that has to be the case. This group could reach consensus on 1 map, and that would be fantastic. But I do think that when we go to have these community meetings, it would be helpful to have something to point at, prop up on an easel, have people put stickers on it if that's what they want to do, and talk about. So I think delaying it to analyze where we somehow survey who believes they're a member of a community of interest, which is poorly defined, is not a very good exercise to have. I would imagine that each of you, particularly the ones talking about communities of interest, probably already have an idea of who you would like to assert as a community of interest. And if that's the case, fine, go ahead and put it out there. We can talk about it. We've already heard the university pitched as a community of interest tonight, a very large one, that being a community of interest of 38,000 or so, right? So can we, let's see here, Bob, stop sharing. I can.
You need me to share again?
No, it's okay. We did get hung up for quite a while on that one item. We are now to the timeline, which is what Dr. Lopez has been suggesting we address. So maybe we can talk about that. I have my calendar here on my phone that I can look at, and as far as my availability goes, I don't know that you all want me there at these meetings. I think I probably will be there. But
I'm sure
are we looking, we need 5 business days of notice for any community meeting. We might want to have a workshop or 2 in advance of that to sort of flesh out some maps that we think are even possibly viable. So are we looking at late October, early November for community meetings? I'm mindful that Halloween falls on a weekend this year, so it's not going to be a midweek distraction.
That last,
I thought Bob just said that we had to be done by November. I mean, if we have filing by November 15th, we've got to get our proposed maps to the commissioners before that so that they can take that data and look at it and make their decision before everybody files. So
yeah, I think we need to work backwards from that point. What would be the meeting that they would vote?
Well,
and then work.
So they have meetings on the 2nd and the 9th. Bob, this is where I get a little fuzzy on the technicalities. Do they need to be posting and publishing notice before that?
They need to publish notice in both English and Spanish, at least probably 10 days before the public hearing, at which time they will consider and vote on adopting a plan. So that needs to be before November the 15th. Now, if the legislature gets tied up and hadn't passed anything, that can be pushed back, but it's looking to me from here that they've got a plan that they're getting ready to vote and cram through so they can hold the primary in March. Well, that's going to just, I was hoping they would push it back to May. We could get this done if the primary was in May, but March, that's going to be tough.
Yeah. So then we would have these community meetings. We could have a work session next week. Well, we have our meeting scheduled for the 20th already. Now, we only need 72 hours notice to you all to have another one.
We should probably put one more in between there, just to be
Next week
safe.
sometime.
I would like to recommend again that I come to Hayes County on Monday, the 18th, about 8 o'clock in the morning and sit down with whoever the committee wants to sit down and try to knock out 1, 2, or 3 alternatives so that your public hearings have something to talk about. Otherwise, we're going to talk for 2 more hours like we're doing here and not getting much anywhere.
Yeah.
They're proposing that we would have a workshop then for the committee on the 18th in that morning.
However many people feel like they need to be there, yes, ma'am, that's what I would propose, just to get this thing going on a real basis. I've got the time slot. I've got other clients, you know, so I've got to tend to other people's business too. So, I mean, that's a time slot I've got. It's pretty quick. And I mean, otherwise y'all can do that work locally with Steve and let me look at the data. I want to look at the data to give you a legal opinion before it goes public, but you know,
Right.
I just want to stress that time is wasting and we need to get after it pretty damn hard.
If we do Monday, is that? This is Bob. Hey, if we do Monday, the 18th, I've got to ask the question, are any of you folks judges on early voting? It's first day of early voting.
Yeah.
Mark, are you involved? Okay.
Yeah, the other one.
Then I'm free. I'm free Monday, the 18th, with a follow-up meeting as we had it planned on the night of the 7th. But on that Monday, the 18th meeting, I think we ought to look at Mark, Traian, I think we ought to look at the maps that your folks are drawing up, look at the maps that our folks are drawing up, and Bob, look at whatever maps you have that you're drawing up.
Hey, Bob, I've got an idea. If we're meeting on Monday, the 18th, which is 2 weeks away, basically, maybe a little less, can we go ahead and get with the portal some questions up for people to start responding to about their communities? Things like, you know, their local economic and social community, and go ahead and start pulling in some data from people. Even though we're not having public meetings, can we actually ask for people to tell us a little bit about their community? We'll have some questions laid out. That way we collect some data in the meantime.
Rather than send those questions as they're looking at the maps that are brought forward, I'd rather than just submit those questions in writing to Mark Kennedy on the chat form or something like we talked about earlier, and not confuse the meeting with questions from outside. That'd just be too.
No. I don't think you're understanding. On the portal, and I'm
On the
actually talking to
website.
Bob. I'm actually talking to Bob Bass here, Bob.
I don't see anything wrong with it. I think that would give you some opportunity to get some data early. I'm not real sure, you know, without somebody. I'm skeptical of trying to define a community of interest down to the census block. I just don't think that's feasible, but I think you could do it. Not necessarily, election precincts don't necessarily encompass communities of interest. They may fragment them. So it may need we may need to move away from voting boxes down to census block levels. That just becomes much more time consuming. But that's, I guess, if you're going to focus on ill-defined communities of interest.
Yeah, I think we're overemphasizing the community of interest here, because the And I think Ruben will probably agree that, you know, the voting precincts that are established in Hayes County right now pretty well define the communities of interest that we're going to find. I can't imagine there'll be too radical departure from that. So I think we ought to go with the idea of presenting the maps on the 18th. We will be prepared to present a map down to the precinct level, voting precinct level on the 18th for consideration. And Mark Trahan, I think your group ought to be able to do the same thing. And Bob, you already done yours, but you haven't presented it at the precinct level, which we'd like to see. And with those three maps, then I think we could move forward throughout the rest of the board.
On the voting box level. That's what you
Well,
told me to do last time.
It doesn't show it on here,
No.
though.
It does.
It's now.
Might not have been what we were seeing on it.
Yeah,
Just going back quickly, I know Dr. Trahan was trying to collect data. I wonder if it's just a simple question of what is your concern about, you know, that you would like to have addressed for redistricting? That perhaps that then gives us a sense of what that is, and we can determine, is that a concern? Are we considering that? Or is there something we haven't thought about that would be a consideration?
So I think at that point, we can put some prompts near the Q&A section on our web portal. And we can say, you know, email us if you have concerns, or if you feel that you're a member of a community of interest and you would like to describe that, then make a comment. And we can disseminate that. We can put that out on the Facebook page and other ways to disseminate it and see if we get interest. Right.
Can y'all see the map that's on the screen now?
No, I can quit sharing mine and then allow you to share.
No, we can see it, and you do, and now you do have the VTDs in there with the Census Bureau IDs for each one of the precincts.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
And
so
that's
yeah,
what I
now we can see it, and we can confirm it's 111, 112, and 115's and pulled out. 301 was the other indention, but 301 is, it doesn't have any voters, doesn't have any population, zero. It's just farmland, but it's been already set aside for future growth.
Well, like I say, I could sit, you have to zoom in this, you have to zoom in real tight to see all of the information. And so I did build it on VTDs, but again, I don't know where the college is, for example. The college isn't, it's probably available as at some level, but you know, apartments don't tell me whether they're college apartments. It's just hard for me to know what I'm doing other than taking whole voting boxes and trying to make something legally work.
And we can get that for you. The college apartments are real sick, 45 of them that are, they're called rent by the beds, and only college students live there. So they're fairly easy to identify.
Well, like I say, if somebody that knows their neighborhoods can meet with me Monday or 18th, I think we could knock out some plans pretty quick.
What
If you've
time?
got plans already in mind, we could replicate them and tell you.
Real quick, I'll check.
So
What's your
we could use a little time for setup on the 18th. Here's what I would propose. Why don't we do a work session? It's still going to be a work session that's not open to the public, but is live streamed. We can do it in the commissioner's courtroom. And I believe we can work from a computer that's linked to the large screen, which can be live streamed. We can also mic up committee members, commission members, so that the public could hear in a live stream the comments being made. And so that we still have the transparency, but then we're all present and available to tinker with it, so to speak. That'd be okay?
I know you're saying we have to meet with you individually.
All right with me.
You, these guys.
frame for when we're thinking on Monday, the 18th?
I was going to say 9 a.m. if you all would give us a little time beforehand to get everything open. And Bob, would that be okay? You mentioned 8, but
I can be there whenever you need me there, but I've got to go to Bastrop in time. I got to leave in time to be in Bastrop by 2.
okay. Yeah, that would give us probably a 3.5 hours, 4-hour session if we needed it. And I guess
Is this on the 18th?
yes.
Okay.
So, roughly 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. we could block. And I don't even know if the commissioner's courtroom is available at that time, but I will find out first thing tomorrow. And if it's not, we'll adjust. What if we did that? Would we need the Wednesday, the 20th meeting? It might be a good time. We might want to have our meeting the evening of the 20th just to sort of round out and make a plan for the community meetings. Would that still be okay? Or will we be tired of each other by then for the week?
Maybe. I think it's good to have that on the books so that we then really can put together the plan for the community meetings.
Right. Agreed.
Well, I can produce large format maps, 36 by 28 or bigger. I don't know exactly for the public hearings. I just need a little bit of time to get the maps together and then print them out. But if you get, I could have them, if we do something constructive on the 18th, we could probably have hard copy maps by the 20th.
Okay.
Will this be live stream?
Bob Bass,
Yes.
are
That'd be the plan.
we going to be mapping at the census block level or at the voting district level?
I thought we were all agreed the census block, the voting district, BTD election precinct was the way to go.
Okay, I just want to make sure I know.
Yeah, you bet. Now, the week of the 25th, which is the week following the 18th and the 20th, we could try to schedule some community meetings that week and we originally talked about a hybrid, actually out in the precincts and try to live stream it. I think that's going to be very difficult to do. I've thought of some options for that. One option I thought of would be to have maybe a 30-minute to hour-long session by Zoom right before the community meeting. So if the community meeting started at 6 p.m., we could, jump on a Zoom call from 5 to 6 and see if it's just sort of like I'm available. And if anybody had comments or questions, then we could field them to our best ability. If you try to hybrid live stream a community event where people are mixing and mingling and discussing maps, it's just too hard to make it work, I think. Anybody disagree with that?
I don't disagree with that. I think that's very hard. Mhm.
Yeah. I'd be happy to hear ideas. I think what the charter contemplates is that we would go out into the precincts and have meetings. So we could identify sometimes week of the 25th or later to have those. I know we're dealing with a tight timeline.
Mark, have these typically occurred during the week, or is there weekend time that's better? Thinking about families and individuals who might want to participate, but it's difficult during the day, mornings, or even evening.
I agree. But if you have school-age children, it's going to be really challenging for a lot of people.
Yeah, it will be. That's why I was trying to come up with an electronic option. We have the email address which people can send comments to, but
Is it typically, Mark, that I guess I just don't recall. Is it specifically worded that we must be present in the different districts or that we have to present in the different districts? Because
Let me
it
pull
almost
that up.
equitable, more fair if we just did it all online. Everyone has a forum and could have the
Not everybody has a connection to doing that. I've always done public hearings in person in the precincts.
Yeah,
Just because you can have maps, people can come up and look at and point to, and if you do it virtually, you're gonna leave. You can take, I mean, y'all are fairly sophisticated folks. I mean, and even that is hard to see what, you know, you want to see because it's, you
Yeah.
got to zoom into it. So, I mean, we can make a map that have, you know, that looks more like this on a large map that has the precinct numbers. Now, people will have to understand the last 3 digits is the precinct.
yeah, you
But I
got
don't think you can hold public hearings effectively virtually with the technology as it is, as good as it is. It's not everybody has the ability to get online.
I
And those are
agree.
mostly the people that need to be represented.
right.
Yeah.
And that's why I thought maybe we could have a place where then it would be accessible. But I understand, I mean, in person is always the best option to be able to discuss things like this.
Yeah, and the way it reads, Dr. Lopez, to answer your question, is it says in the RAC work session, which may be closed to the public, the RAC shall schedule at least 4 community meetings, at least one within each of the 4 commissioners' precincts to provide information and receive input. So it does indicate that it would be in the precincts. Now, I'm, you know, we can ask the court to amend the charter and say not possible, but I think that we all agree it might be best to do it that way, so.
Right.
So is it possible then that similar to maybe like a commissioner's court or a council meeting, that those who would like to speak then could sign up so we knew who might have questions and do that type of process so that they're able to at least be in the queue. They know they're going to be heard. They know they've signed up. They have a spot.
You bet, and we could use the RA Commission email. When we advertise the meeting, say if you're not able to make the meeting and you would like to comment, send an email to the RA Commission email address, and then we can have those comments available at the community meeting as well. I don't know if we would bother to read them all aloud. That's up to you all. Depends on how we want to run the show.
I would urge some caution on that. I agree with the concept, but if we're going to have a lot of people chatting, we could be there till midnight, and
Right.
they're going to be, some of them are going to be venting about, well, this commissioner didn't do that, or this, you know, and it's not a gripe session, and keeping it strictly in maps and communities of interest might be a challenge on doing that. So I just think we have to be cautious about that.
I think you probably ought to have rules of decorum that limit speakers to no more than 3 minutes.
Yeah,
Well,
but even then, if a big crowd turns out, it could take hours, and you really, you know, you're really wanting to try to do 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and in each, you know, do all 4 precincts in 2 days. You need to squeeze it down as tight as you can.
So one of the things that I learned from TxDOT, because this is how they do their community meetings, they actually don't have like a formal presentation up at the front on a stage and then have people getting up and one at a time speaking into a mic. They set up stations and they let people mingle and sort of wander the room and talk to you all. You all could be set up there, you know, and we could be set up there as well. And it is a very good model, I think, for a community type meeting because everyone feels that they had an opportunity to interact at some point.
I like that a lot. I've seen that work before with TxDOT, and it's so much smoother, and you don't stay, and you can have it for a fixed amount of time. So you're not there all day, but you still get participation by the public.
Right.
I agree.
A quick comment. I mean, we could also have these large printed signs put into the local precinct offices and leave them there for a couple of days before the meeting, letting people to come by and take a look at them firsthand and get get an opportunity to preview those. And we're also, we have to also bear in mind when we're talking about virtual and all this other stuff, we're talking about allowing people to email, which assumes they've got some level of computer sophistication to be able to send an email. We're talking about how are we going to communicate to these people and post notices of meetings and tell them where we're going to be and when we're going to be. We're assuming they can get on the website and do that. I don't know that we're going to have the PIO putting out press releases, have the local news publishing what we're doing. We're relying on people to have a certain level of technology expertise in order to participate in the process. So, it's very important that we utilize it to the best of our ability to make sure we maximize our time. Doesn't mean we want to preclude anybody or exclude anybody, but let's not be so focused on making sure that we get down to the lowest common denominator that we delay ourselves and put this whole process in jeopardy.
If I may, I'd like to suggest, so we can move this meeting on, is that we try to focus on having a workshop meeting for several hours on the 18th, where we actually look at maps that, Bob, you're bringing, maps that we're bringing, and Mark Trahan, any map that you folks want to bring, and we can just kind of look at those maps and try to gain an understanding about it. And then Mark Kennedy and others possibly to meet the meeting notice requirement, that we try to schedule meetings throughout the week in the evenings on the week of the 25th through the 29th. And that would mean arrangement for a place to have the meetings in the various precincts, which Mark Kennedy, I think you folks would have to be involved in that. And schedule those meetings the 25th through the 29th in the 4 commissioners' precincts, and then reconvene this group once or twice in that first week of November to try to hammer out a final map that we would then offer up to the commissioners' court, so they would have I guess the 9th to consider it and the 16th to vote on it. And that might not work exactly right, because as Bob pointed out, if legislature gets this deal done, we might have filing that starts on the 15th, in which case that's not going to work. So we'd have to squeeze it back a few more days back the other way in order to allow the 10 days notice for commissioners court.
And the other thing we have to bear in mind is, regardless of what we do, elections department has to have the time to be able to adjust all the data to be able to make everything possible from that standpoint.
Good point.
I don't know what the effect would be if we don't have a map by the 15th. I know that candidates who want to run will complain bitterly and even threaten lawsuits. As long as the filing period is about 30 days long. So as long as they can file, I don't see that they've been harmed that much, but I don't want to.
They've got till December 13th. They've got till December 13th. That's the end of the filing period as it stands right now. And we know the Texas Senate passed the Senate districts today. They've already pulled the proposed plan for the House districts off, which they usually do before the final vote. So they may be voting on the House. And they also did the BOE earlier today. So they're moving very aggressively forward to get all those districts hammered out.
Well, the only way we could improve on that schedule would be for us to have that whole week of the 25th through the 29th by scheduling our in-district meetings the first 4 days, and have a meeting on Friday, the 29th, for us to basically look at a map that we're going to approve and send to council.
And we've got to bear in mind that's also early voting, so we can't use any of the precincts because they'll be using those for early voting.
Yeah, that's right. That'll be a challenge for sure. I
don't want to raise a specter of a ghost that may not come about, but just because a committee recommends something to the court doesn't necessarily mean the court's going to find that palatable. So my recommendation is that even the court have an option or two rather than just one.
I expect that there still may be some deliberation and disagreement over maps. And now, I mean, again, if we reach consensus and have a kumbaya moment, that's fantastic, and we'll bring one map to them. But I can notice, and Bob, with your help, we can publish notice for the 9th of November. And if the court, for some reason, had not reached agreement by end of day there, they could always roll over to the 10th and keep deliberating about it, and simply get it done. But they have canceled the Commissioners Court on the 16th anyway. So I think whatever we are doing, our objective should be to have their notice published for the 9th of November for when they would consider it and try to vote on it.
In theory, we can download the poll list to the database, and at the address level, we would not load in the names of the voters, but the registration numbers would need to be there. So the poll list could be spun out. When we move a boundary, we move the people affected by that boundary change. So hopefully, this has not been tested in the real world. The poll list could be pretty clean, and it would be fairly easy for the voter registration, I mean, the voter ID cards and stuff to be modified, but you still got to send out notice to let people know where they're going to vote by election day. But there's a lot of work that has to be done at the registration, I mean, the voter registration and elections administration level after the map is approved.
Right.
Is it too ambitious for us to meet on the 18th and 20th and try to have these community meetings on Friday, the 22nd and Saturday, the 23rd? I guess my thoughts are, just having sat in a place where I had to have a decision, sometimes it was nice to have that extra week to know, okay, if it was introduced, talked about on the 2nd, then there was the 9th to be able to, if they needed to go back, if they wanted additional information. So they didn't feel pressed as well. Just my thoughts. And I know that's ambitious, but something to consider.
'22nd and 23rd is doable by me.
The evening of the 23rd would be a challenge for me, but I'm otherwise available.
We talking about during the daytime, or are we talking about in the evening?
During the
Probably-
day, because it's a Saturday, right?
Mhm.
Not the 22nd. 22nd is a Friday.
Right, the 23rd.
Yeah.
Yeah, fitting all 4 in, we had to do. I mean, I don't know if anybody wants to do a Sunday. I know that that's a difficult day also to host something like this also.
But you're gonna have problems with the 23rd because of high school football for participation if you try to do it in the evening. And 22nd, of course, Saturday would work. 23rd, then we deal with church.
Well, no, the 22nd is the Friday.
Yeah, I've got a day off.
Yeah,
24th,
yeah.
we deal with church.
Right.
So
I'm fine
22nd,
with doing
24th may be challenging to get some participation depending on where we are. We'll have to look at the high school football schedules because we don't want to do a Dripping Springs home game and try to do precinct 4, or San Marcos home game and try to do precinct 1.
Yeah.
Michelle, I'm open to doing it on a Saturday.
Just a thought, I'm just trying to help us. I know we're in a crunch right now, really trying to work backwards. So we should try to get
Yeah,
it
you
to-
bet. Well, we could, to Bob's point, we could knock out 2 of them on the 23rd, one morning, one early afternoon, and then you'd only have 2 left for the week of the 25th instead of 4 nights, which is pretty grueling for anyone, I think. What do y'all think about that?
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
We'll look at possibly the 23rd for 2 precincts and then 25th through 29th for the others. Are there any really good nights or bad nights for anybody the week during the weeknights, week of the 25th?
Tuesday is difficult for me to rearrange things,
Okay.
but I.
Evenings.
Monday's
Tuesday and
difficult.
Wednesday.
Steve, what did you say? I'm sorry.
Monday's difficult, and yeah, Tuesday's just regularly, everybody else seems to want to meet on Tuesdays.
Right. So maybe 27th and 28th or something like that.
And I've already got meetings on the 27th. I can rearrange for the 28th.
Okay. You have meetings on the 27th, Shannon?
In the evenings, yeah, both.
27th and 28th is okay with me, and 2 of them on the 23rd is okay with me.
Okay.
The 28th does not work for me. The 27th would work.
Well, do we all need to be at every meeting, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. What's the answer there?
Do we have
You're gonna
a quorum?
find everybody's calendar allows everybody to attend, but you ought to have at least somebody who can speak from either, since your chairs are Democrat and Republican, I don't know, it seems you got it, that, and it's sort of set up to have 2 different viewpoints, but there ought to be representation from the committee able to speak to the committee as a whole. So I don't know that you need any more than 1 member, but if you try to get everybody there, we'll never get a meeting date.
Yeah, that's right. Why don't we shoot for, it sounds like we have a good number who can make either the 27th or the 28th. So what I'll do for now in terms of exploration, keep in mind, we can keep modifying this and I'll email everybody if I need to get more input. But right now I'm going to go for 2 meetings on the 23rd, 1 morning, 1 early afternoon. And I'm going to go for 1 meeting on the night of the 27th and 1 on the night of the 28th. And we'll see if we can't make that happen.
Sorry, just one other thing, Mark, if you wanted, again, this is ambitious, I know.
Yeah.
There is a meeting on Thursday, the 21st, and something during the day on Friday, the 22nd. The only reason I bring that up is there's a lot of time in between Saturday, the 23rd, and the following week. And, depending on what the questions and concerns are, what gets put in motion, 5 days later, we may want to have them very close together. That's the only thought.
The 21st is open. Now, it's a tight timeline for Bob to get his maps done. I know he said he thought he could get it done by the 20th, but that's a pretty tight timeline. I heard Steve loud and clear on the 22nd, with it being a football night. It may have a chilling effect on attendance.
I'm thinking maybe that could be a daytime one, though.
I'm sorry.
I was suggesting that would be the daytime, though.
Oh, daytime. Yeah, okay. On the Friday. Any ideas on that, guys?
I'm confused. What is the question?
Well, Dr. Lopez was suggesting that instead of pushing all the way out to the 27th and 28th for our other 2 meetings, we could precede the 23rd and have some afternoon meetings on the 21st and 22nd, so that we have them all pop kind of right in a row, 21st, 22nd, and 23rd.
I can do an
that would-
afternoon on the 21st. I cannot do an evening on the 21st.
But you can't afternoon.
I can do an afternoon on the 21st.
Okay.
The problem is that's during the day. It's during a work day. So I don't know what kind of participation you're going to get. That's my
Yeah.
concern.
Yeah.
I think it may be a smarter choice just to do 2 Saturdays, the 23rd and the 30th. That'd be my suggestion, but
Bear in mind, the 30th, there are a lot of activities going on during that day for Halloween.
Halloween.
oh, that's true.
Well,
We keep
stick with
pushing down toward this election deadline. Am I talking? Yeah. we keep pushing out toward this election deadline, the way the legislature's going. You know, we got to get our work done, because it looks to me like they may conclude, like Bob was saying, and if they do, in order to give the election office time to, you know, redo ballots as necessary and redo voting registers so people know where they're going to vote, and not have absolute chaos. We need to conclude this as quickly as possible.
Well, I think we're
doing it.
23rd. Let's see if we can make things happen evenings the 27th, 28th then. And if I hit a hitch, I'll email you all. All right.
Mark,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes. Mhm.
You need a moderator. We need a structure to these meetings. And I've done this before. I'm not going to do it again, but I've done it before. But you need a moderator, because you need somebody to lead the show once we have the public meeting, and then to set the guidelines. It has to be somebody who's very diplomatic and very understanding, because people, how would I put this? They could get a little irate. And then
You're saying I'm not the right guy for the job.
No. I'm saying if you're going to do it, then you should do it. I don't have a problem. But like Wimberley only had 20 people, where Kyle had 200. San Marcos had 30 people. So here again, you need somebody who's able to really show that the county knows what they're doing, that the commission knows what they're doing, and gives them the opportunity to express themselves, even if they get out of hand. They can still express themselves. And
well, so
3-minute timeline is a good timeline. I think that's what the city uses. That's what the school district uses. That you should give them 3 minutes to talk and then finish it up.
I don't like Mark's idea originally about what the text does, where you let everybody talk at stations and you have those discussions rather than having a formal, we're going to listen to your 3 minutes and your 3 minutes, and 14 hours later we're done. Cause I feel like when I've done those in the past, I've been able to participate well. And I feel like getting to talk to people at each one of those sites was pretty effective in answering my questions, whether I agreed or disagreed with it. But that might be a better way if we have a room full of 200 people to get those ideas across.
I agree.
That's why I had that idea. And Ruben, I don't know if I think you were on when I
Yeah,
moved
like you're
earlier,
talking a workshop where
the community meetings.
Yeah, and I've been to the city of San Marcos where they have a table set up. The public can go and sit down at the table. There's 10 of them, and participate. So I don't have a problem with that. I just don't know how that's going to work, how it's all going to interface.
Well, I think we can work on, like the logistics of that when we meet on the 18th. We can talk about that a little bit after we've discussed maps. But, the idea would be, and I had planned to maybe get up and introduce each of you individually who are in attendance at those meetings.
Don't do
that. Yeah. You can put the glasses and mustache on and stand in the back of the room, But, and to sort of say, this is what the mission of the RAC has been. Here are your opportunities to interact, and then let people do that from there. And so it's just a small introduction, and then it's mingling from there.
Well, as long as you have a plan, I'm fine.
Well,
having a place for people to sit and write, if they want to, I've seen those text up meetings. You can sit and write your comments, and then those can be entered in to the record. And so we'll make sure to record what people are wanting to express.
Yeah. Yeah, they do work well. I'm not saying that ours will work well, but I've seen them work well in the past.
We're expecting it to work well, Mark. That's the whole idea.
Let's say he of little faith.
All right. Well, I think I have what I need in terms of timeline. We're going to publish by October 29th for a November 9th consideration by the Commissioners Court. We are meeting on the 18th at 9 a.m., preferably in the Commissioners Court room, and I'm going to check that tomorrow. We're going to meet still electronically on the 20th in the evening at 7, just to cover whatever bases we have remaining to cover before the community meetings, which will happen on the 23rd, 2 of them, and the 27th and 28th, 1 each. We will put signs in the precinct offices or maps up in the precinct offices as we have them available prior to those meetings. It'll be a tight timeline for the ones on the 23rd, but we'll do our best. And in the meantime, I've heard loud and clear, Bob, that you have not gotten the 2010 data yet. I thought you had. I'm going to check on that in the morning. My apologies. And then
I've been snowed under. I'm spending most of my days with my nose in the computer, and you may have sent it, and then it's gotten lost in the hundreds of emails that I get every day. So I'll look for it again, but
I'll check.
Would Janice be sending it?
Yes, it'd be Janice or Steve Floyd, one or the other. I'll make sure
All right.
does that. And then Steve Floyd, I think he wouldn't normally disclose this to in a venue that's going to be put on a public website, but Steve put it in an email. I think you all know that he had a surgery not long ago and is on the mend, and that's why he's been out and not available. So apologies for that, but I'll make sure that, he did, Steve Meyer ask what all you needed in addition to just the electronic map. And I will get him your comment from tonight so that he has that and can, he's going to show up, I believe, on the 18th anyway. That's my intention. But I think it'd be important for you all to get that electronic map before then so that you can tinker. So we're gonna endeavor to do that. And Dr. Trahan, to you as well.
Yeah, if we can do that, we could, very easily PDF or print and bring maps that we could share with the other members so everybody can look at it, since we're going to have the opportunity to meet in person anyhow.
Yeah, you bet.
Are we, is the agenda for the meeting on the 18th to bring maps? Is that the idea?
I think you could. It could be a basis for moving some lines and seeing what happens. You may know that already, but it's, when you bring your own version of a map, that could be potentially combined with another map, and you never know what magic could happen from that. But
It would be helpful to have
ready to
not
disclose that
only
yet?
a map, but a database.
What's that,
Yeah,
Bob?
on what?
It would be helpful to have a map and then a demographic analysis chart similar to what I've been using, so that the map can actually be analyzed. I will tell you some horror stories. I've gotten maps that say they do certain things, but when I actually plug that map into my system, I get different data. So whether that be deliberate or whether that be transpositional error or whatever, but I think it's got to be in a form that can be analyzed fairly readily.
Yeah.
Mark Kennedy,
Yes.
just a thought, should maybe you run this schedule by Jennifer Anderson and just see if she has any, horror thoughts about this from her perspective?
Well, yeah, and I am, I think Steve may have mentioned earlier, early voting is going to get in the way some of these communities, because the very places you would meet will be taken up with ballot boxes. And I intend to call her in the morning and talk to her about that. But I'll also mention the schedule to her and see if she raises any other concerns.
Please do. Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like we might want to go ahead and schedule one other meeting We don't have anything scheduled right now after the 4th community meeting in order to
Okay.
wrap up consideration, everything. If we're doing it on the 28th, that's the last one. I know I do have availability on the 29th, if that's possible, just to kind of help us not lose everything that we have gathered and anything that we want to do to be ready for that. You're going to post for the 9th, but be ready to have that.
How about, how about Saturday, the 30th during the day, Michelle? Is that a home game?
No,
Yeah.
I'm not available on that Saturday.
Sorry, Shannon.
That I'm not
Saturday.
available on that Saturday. I'm out of town.
Okay.
And I'm not available on that Saturday.
All right.
All right, well, then let's go back to Friday, the 29th, but that,
Well, it could be, this is not a community meeting, so we could meet electronically like this. And it could even be late afternoon instead of evening, if that worked better for everybody. That way into football time or whatever else you have going. I don't know.
okay, well, how about 2 o'clock or 2:30 or something like that on the 29th?
Mhm.
Michelle's okay with it?
I'm okay with it.
Shannon's
Shannon's
good.
good. Dr. Trahan, you okay with it?
Yeah, that's fine. Mark, can you just review here real quick our dates? Like I'm a little
You bet.
lost here. We keep adding stuff and subtracting, and can
Yeah.
we just go back over this again, please?
Just
Could
watching.
you just email it to us?
Yeah,
Well, I just want to look at it before we finish up, if that's okay. And
Yeah,
then we
you bet. I can recite it right now.
great,
I'm going to meet on Monday, the 18th at 9 a.m.
right?
And preferably, and if it's available in the commissioner's courtroom or some other place to be determined. We're also going to meet on Wednesday, the 20th to sort of recount and organize. We're going to have 2 meetings with maps, community meetings on the 23rd in 2 different precincts, one in the morning and one in the early afternoon. I'm thinking that it would be o'clock meeting and then maybe a 1 o'clock meeting. So 10 to noon and then 1 to 3, something like that.
And that's great because Texas State is away and UT doesn't play.
Good, good. And then our next 2 community meetings would be one on the evening of the 27th, time to be determined, but probably 6 or 7 p.m. And then one on the 28th. And then Dr. Lopez made a good point. We probably need to reorganize again at that point and talk about things. So we're going to meet on the 29th at 2 p.m.
Okay, so just FYI, on the 27th, I'd like to request that we can start at 7 because I finished teaching at 6:30, so I'm going to have to leave from teaching to get there. And then you said on the 28th, what time are we thinking on that date?
Well, I think we ought to just go ahead and make them both 7 p.m. then, if that's
Okay.
your preference on the 27th. It'd be fine with me. Is it okay with everybody?
Can we have an end time to those meetings?
Well, I think a 2-hour time frame for those is probably fair, and I think if you get people circulate through and they're probably gone in an hour or a little more, and then we clean up and leave. So 7 to 9.
7 to 9, okay.
If they linger for more than an hour, then they're just a bunch of troublemakers, by golly.
Yeah. Should we ask constables in those districts to provide security during those meetings?
Yes, I think we'll have somebody there just to watch over things. That was Ben's suggestion in the first meeting, I believe, and it's a good point.
Did you add that Friday, the 29th, we've got a meeting too? Is that correct?
Yes, at 2 p.m.
2? Okay, thanks.
And that's just an electronic meeting, not
Right.
a community meeting. So something like this.
Thank you all for
Speaking of
indulging
security,
a piece of my pieces of trying to make sure everything is settled.
That's important. Thank you.
My old programming hat on student affairs.
We're meeting here in the
In-
courtroom. And
All right. Anything, our last item on the agenda is anything else you want to bring up? We have anything else that we need to cover?
Do we know what, when we have those community, is that what we're going to be discussing on the 18th? Is that in part what kind of setup we're going to have for those communities of interest? So,
Yes.
Yeah.
So 18th and the 20th, I think we'll organize ourselves further on how we'll lay out the room and, you know, what stations we want to have and all that.
I think we ought to focus on getting some maps. Anything else is gonna, the 18th needs to be map oriented.
Yeah, yeah. And
We
we,
don't have time to discuss setting the deck chairs on the Titanic. We need to get the maps drawn.
good, yeah. And the 20th we have for organizational stuff too. So in the evening. And Bob, you may not even need to be there for that since you got a lot of counties to cover. So. All right. Well, I'm happy if y'all are happy.
sounds good to me.
All right. Y'all have a wonderful evening and we'll see you next on Monday, the 18th. And I'll be emailing this schedule and I'm sure I'll be corresponding with you all or Janice Jones will be in the meantime.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.